My name is Tenen, and I appreciate you all coming. And I'm a little intimidated because I haven't basically given this presentation for a general audience before. And so we'll see what happens. There are a few things that I want to say first before starting. This is work in progress, and although we're pretty sure we're onto something here, I don't think it would be useful to assume that everything I say is true, because I'm sure there are parts that aren't correct. And that before we can make claims that are perhaps as wide-reaching as these ideas need to be reviewed. They have to pass peer review both in the academic communities and in the religious communities before they're going to be acceptable. And until we've done certain tests that we haven't done, at least not to my satisfaction, we're not ready to do that. So I would prefer if people consider this all speculation. And I'm going to speak quickly because that's what I do. And I'm going to say is when I mean maybe, and like that. So assume when I make strong statements that they really are subject to being tested in some cases. But see for yourself. The basic idea here is that many people have said recently, and I guess over the ages, that there ought to be, or there is, or there should be, or maybe there has been, a relationship between physics and consciousness, and metaphysics, if you will. And that's what I think we found here. This is a more akin to a discovery. This isn't an invention. If I'm right, I didn't make any of this up. To the extent I made it up, it's probably not right. But I believe that this represents a philosophy, a basic underpinning of the philosophy of many cultures in the ancient world and even into modern times. I want to start by putting some context on this, and there's a quotation that I came upon in a book on quantum mechanics for the public called Quantum Reality by Nick Herbert, where at the very end of the book he's getting to the point about why he's interested in physics, which is his field. And he says that he believes one of the greatest scientific achievements imaginable would be the discovery of an explicit relationship between the waveform alphabets of quantum theory and certain human states of consciousness. Now, he didn't really mean an ordinary alphabet when he says alphabets of quantum theory, but in a sense, he does. And I think that's what we really have here. I think that the ancient world, the Greek world, perhaps even earlier, the Hebrew world, later the Muslim world, the cultures that have made claims that their alphabets are sacred, are special, and that their alphabets are the alphabets of creation or reality or other special status. People making those claims in all these cultures, and those claims are made for Hebrew and Greek and Arabic and Sanskrit and some of the Tibetan alphabets and many others, that people who make these claims should be taken seriously. Yes, there are people who make claims like that, and it's just religious puffery, or it's just sort of a poetic license. Well, our alphabet is special, we're going to call it sacred. But many of the people who made these claims have well-established track records. The rabbis, the Greek mathematicians all have other works that they've demonstrated their competence in, and I think it makes sense to take what they said seriously. So that's basically what we're going to look at here. The question first arises is, how can a letter be an element of creation? These alphabets are sacred. I put the Hebrew letter B on the blackboard. This is its printed form, and this is its script form. I'm just going to leave them there. The question does come up. How can a letter, I just drew a letter on the black, how can that be an element of creation? What meaning can that have? Think about it. I want to tell you about the letter B, though, because it's the beginning of the story anyhow. It's the first letter of, I'm going to need a pointer for some of this. I can't remember where. It's right down here. This is the first verse of the text of Genesis in Hebrew. Normally translated, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The first letter is the letter B. And the letter B in Hebrew, its name is Beit, means house, means archetypal container, the distinction between inside and outside. That's the first thing that happens in the life of a child. When a child is born, the first thing that happens is the child has to breathe in and out, and that's an unconscious action. And then a little later, the child has to eat. And in order to eat, it has to distinguish between inside, where the food goes, and outside, where it comes from. So the first element of our consciousness is the distinction between inside or outside. Also, there's an understanding of that relates to physics and to metaphysics, which we'll get to. I wanted to leave that on the table. Now, I wanted to start off, and I'll have to ask your indulgence, by reading some quotations. And the reason I'm going to read these quotations is because they contain ideas that are not commonly known, and that most Jews and Christians, I don't know if we have any Muslims here, but basically most people who know about the Bible, know about religious ideas, don't know this. And many people violently reject what I'm going to read. What I'm going to read is, I'll give you the references. These are mostly rabbinic references, but I go a little farther afield than that. So let me just read them to give you a sense of some possibilities here, because I'm going to be playing with the letters of the text of Genesis. And the question is, what right do I have to do that? Doesn't everyone know what the text of Genesis says? Hasn't it been translated often enough by now? And the answer is, maybe too often. First quote is quoted in Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's book, The Light Beyond, Adventures in Hasidic Thought, and it's attributed to Rabbi Yehoshua Avram of Zitmar. And he says, "Our sages teach us that the Torah was created 2,000 years before the world. This is difficult to understand, since the Torah contains accounts of many events that happened after creation. How can the Torah speak of creation, Adam and Eve, Noah, the holy patriarchs, and all the other things recorded in the Torah? All these things had not yet happened when the Torah was written." And then he explains, "Actually, when the Torah was first created, it was a mixture of letters. The letters of the Torah were not yet combined into words as they are now. Whenever anything then happened in the world, these letters were combined and the words were recombined to form the account. This was true of the account of creation, the story of Adam and Eve. The letters combined with each other, forming the words that told this story. Similarly, when an individual died, a combination of letters was formed saying that he died. The same was true of the rest of the Torah. As soon as an event that was to be recorded in Torah took place, a combination was immediately formed corresponding to that event. If a different event had taken place, the letters would have combined differently." Interesting idea. A further comment by another rabbi, this is Rabbi Levi Yitzhak, also quoted by Kaplan. "In its sequence of descent into this lowly world, the Torah must become clothed in a material garment, which often consists of stories." And these are the stories that have been translated, of course. "When God grants a person knowledge, understanding, and intelligence, uncovering the mask that blinds his eyes, he can see the wonders of God's Torah. The people on this level are few, however, and the majority only understand the Torah according to its simple meaning." The creationists are not going to like what I'm going to be presenting here today, because I'm not talking about the story in Genesis at all, although we'll see why the story does have some relevance. It's basically a simple metaphor for the deeper metaphor. And here's another fellow makes even a stronger statement. This is in the Zohar, and it's quoted by Louis Ginsberg. And it says, the Zohar is one of the chief Kabbalistic books. It says, "Woe unto the man who asserts that this Torah intends to relate only commonplace things and secular narratives. For if this were so, then in the present times likewise the Torah might be written with more attractive narratives. Now the narratives of the Torah are its garments. He who thinks that these garments are the Torah itself deserves to perish and have no share in the world to come. Woe unto the fools who look no further when they see an elegant robe. More valuable than the garment is the body which carries it, and more valuable even than that is the soul which animates the body. Fools see only the garment of the Torah, the more intelligent see the body, the wise see the soul, its proper being, and in the messianic time, the upper soul of the Torah will stand revealed." The idea is that we're not looking at just a sequence of stories. Now now that we know that this isn't just a set of stories, what is it? And I have a couple of other quotes that give us some sense as to what might be going on here. This is from Carlos Suarez, who is a Kabbalist, died a few years ago. This is from his Cipher of Genesis. And he says, "In the severity of its beginning, in its first chapter, in its first verse, in its first sequence of letter numbers," all of a sudden these are no longer just